But welcome to our panel, Securing by Design, Building Trustworthy Security Services. I am Megan Doherty. I'm a technical specialist in cybersecurity from Microsoft Canada, which is a fancy way of saying a pre-sales engineer. And I am so grateful to be joined by JP Persaud, who's the Director of Cybersecurity in the Ontario Government, and Dr. Anne Cavoukian, the Queen of Privacy by Design herself from the Design Center. Amazing. Awesome. So I wanted to start our panel today by doing a brief introduction into kind of what securing by design looks like, especially when security is often kind of an afterthought with organizations when we think of software development life cycles. And within the last couple of years, we've heard quite a lot about this notion of shifting left, and what that means is prioritizing security practices such as, our Q&A testing and our patching quite later in the development life cycle, but also how do we bring this across in the shift left motion go through the rest of our IT organizations. And given the development of the shift left movement, I'd love to start off and by asking you the question, what have you noticed in the development of securing by design as a framework over the last few years? And do you feel like we are where we need to be kind of as cybersecurity organizations?
I don't think we're even close to where I think we need to be. Can you hear me? Is this okay? I won't use the mic.
Okay.
Security is so important. Cybersecurity is absolutely critical. With that, hand in hand goes privacy. And I always say, in terms of privacy by design and security by design, don't think of it as a zero-sum game, privacy versus security, or one or the other. Are you kidding me? Throw that out the door. You need positive sum privacy and security hand in hand. And we've never needed it more than now. With the growth of AI is exploding, as you well know. And let me be clear, I'm a big fan of AI. Especially in the medical area, the advances that it is facilitating are incredible. So I welcome AI, but not to the exclusion of privacy and security. You can't just allow AI to go and scour hundreds of thousands of databases and extract information, much of which might be personally identifiable data. Now, of course, you have to obtain the consent or the knowledge of the recipient of the data subject. So what we have to frame is embedding security and privacy proactively into everything that we do. Cybersecurity measures, AI, without a doubt. And I'm working very closely with the Ontario government. Last Thursday just introduced a motion. MP Gallagher introduced this motion in the House, and she sent it to me first for me to review it. She said, is this doable? I said, absolutely. It basically said the government must review all AI measures and ensure that they're being acted upon responsibly, and privacy and security measures are included. These measures are essential. So I was delighted that this MVP started this and started it going. And you look everywhere around the world. The EU, there's the EU AI EU Act. In the US, there's legislation coming out. We have to be proactive on this. We have to move now. Because AI, because it is so remarkable and its growth is massive, what you don't want is for people to say, I used to be on Twitter and I tweet the latest stories every morning with me. And someone would invariably tweet back and say, lady, give it up, that ship has sailed. And I'd say, you give it up, get another freaking ship. You don't give up when something is difficult. You embrace it even more. You must be proactive in this area. Cybersecurity, which is essential. Privacy, which forms the foundation of our freedom. You cannot give up on these measures. And so I'm asking you to please consider this anytime you're going to get engaged in this area.
Amazing. And I think often as we're kind of starting this journey, or hopefully no one's starting the journey, but we're continuing through it, it's hard to assess the appetite for risk and for taking on this shifting movement. So with that, Jason, you've gone through quite a lot of changes with your organization, and when you approach them with this security-first development framework, how is that received?
Yeah, it didn't start as a framework. It started as sheer necessity. You heard Dr. Ann talk about proactiveness. When cloud started to proliferate, the notion of delivering in an agile methodology started to become the status quo, because you could go from ideation to implementation very, very quickly, and we actually had technology that could scale as fast as you could think it. You could enable it, test it. When folks heard that, okay, well, that's great, so we just want to move faster. So organizations like the government where I'm from, so we want to transform more digital services, we want to turn them on faster to serve the citizens, serve the public. That was all good. And the minute you then started to say, but we want to do it securely, you heard, whoa, whoa, whoa. Security means slow. That's what people hear. They don't hear secure by design, they don't hear agile, they don't hear anything that represents, they hear slow. And so we really had to say, look, you're not going to fight the way the trend is going. You heard Dr. Ann, don't fight, embrace it. AI has all this greatness, but we have to be responsible about how we turn it on. So when we started our journey, it was, we can't fight cloud. Cloud is going to enable so much good things, of which now we're seeing with, using that infrastructure to just make intelligent thoughts. We have to look at how do we embed it in every step of the process. So if security is slow because you've already built something, ideated, tested it, told your minister what a great good news story this is going to be, and then you come to security and security says, oh man, I wouldn't go live if I was you with that. It's not something someone wants to hear, but what if you could start right from sitting with a team and says, what is this idea that's going to transform the way we as citizens live? Wow, that's cool. And how are we going to do that? And what if we embed the security check marks, the security common sense really, into that, not only ideation, implementation, testing, to go live? We changed the game at that point, and we started to create secure and trustworthy products. And it's funny, it sounds commonsensical when you say it, but most major things, like, think about the car you drive. There was a day that car did not have a seatbelt in it. And now, cars that we go to buy are literally measured on how many safety features they have in it. It's a badge of honor. 25 safety features standard, not additional, not an upgrade. So, we look at how we live our lives. We wouldn't buy a house without locks. We wouldn't buy a car without a seatbelt. If we can create that into our ideating process for any product that we're going to either buy, and we'll talk about that in a bit, or build, we're really starting to think at every step and really satisfying secure by design. But until we put that common sense 2 and 2 together, it was security slow. I'm gonna hurry up. You guys need to change what you do. And they weren't wrong when they said that. We did have to change how we embed ourselves, but it wasn't as controversial as people think. It's just really commonsensical if you think about it.
Yeah, a lot of this comes down to change management, right? And how you're going to enact change management within your teams and your organization. And it's interesting, you talk about the cloud adoption and this transparency. As Microsoft really coming in as a vendor, right? So for me, I feel great representing my organization, knowing that we have standards that we attain to. And when we're thinking about the security life cycle, and you're bringing in a new product into your organization, you need to know that the product that you're bringing in is also adopting those frameworks. I see a lot of startups, you want to innovate so fast, and developers, especially if you're coming straight out of school, you're told to innovate fast enough. You want to use the best APIs, but what are you doing to patch your dependencies regularly when you're going to go ship that software, and so forth. And when we're talking about privacy standards, and in your experience over the last couple of years, how has it been developing a standard and having that adopted by governments and organizations, and how has it been socializing this?
It's you may be surprised by what I'm about to say, in that it has improved considerably. And one of the reasons it's been improving is because it was so bad before. I mean, virtually there was no consideration for privacy, security a little bit. I mean, it was so weak And the good news is, what did people do? They objected to this. You had so many complaints. You had average citizens saying this is completely unacceptable. And you had so many data leaks. Mm-hmm. Oh my God. And the class action lawsuits that arose from this, big companies, many companies, they went under. They couldn't, millions of dollars were lost. So unfortunately, because there was all that negativity to begin with, things began to improve. And when I was privacy commissioner, I had just created privacy by design, so it was many years ago, and the interest in it was limited at the beginning, but it grew dramatically. It was embraced by the EU, even in the US, and just last year, for the first time ever, it was made an ISO standard, an international standard organization, ISO standard, which is like huge. And you wouldn't believe the number of calls and inquiries I get from countries all around the world. Literally, Japan, Europe, Australia, Brazil, all these countries are now, everybody's waking up to, we have to address this privacy thing with security. I always tell people, you can't have privacy without security. They are just intrinsically intertwined. And so getting this message across, and that it's not going to hurt your business interests if you do this. I get invited to speak to many boards, and often I'll enter the room, and the board will be there with the CEO, and they'll be, their heads down. They're not happy to see me. They don't want to do it. They're forced to do it. And the first thing I say to them, I say, give me 10 minutes. Let me show you how embedding privacy and security into your operations can actually enhance your business interests dramatically. And then they go like this, you mean we can keep doing what we're doing, or we can do it better? And that's the messaging that I have to get across, that this is going to enhance your business opportunities, not detract from them. And it's all about how to embed it proactively and address these issues. Once you frame it like that, then they want to embrace it, because they were thinking they'd have to shut down a bunch of things. No, you don't have to shut it down. You just have to address these issues up front and find a way to weave it into your operations. So that's been my experience with it.
Amazing. And when we're thinking about this, we want to know, now we have standards that we can follow, but let's take it into our direct teams and organizations. And Jason, with what you've been working on within the Ontario government, what have been measurable improvements you've seen from your team since moving to a proactive security mindset around development and implementation?
Yeah. So you heard Dr. Ann talk about how at first it's always treated with some contention. It's like, wait a minute, if you're going to change, and you heard Megan talk about the change management aspects of transforming. It's always the biggest part of what you're going to deal with. But, you also heard Dr. Ann talk. Well, big believer is you got to lead with sugar, right? And so we had to lead with sugar in our org. So the first thing we did was we started to meet with different stakeholders that had a vested interest in moving faster, to really saying, hey, I need to move fast, so that means I'm going to, diminish quality. And that's not really an option. You heard, you cannot. In fact, the table stakes have gone up. The one quality check is privacy and security. You cannot actually reduce. We need to do better. So we said, hey, this is not going to be a hindrance to you moving faster. It's going to enable you to move faster. That's how we started. And that got us a foot at the table, or a foot in the door to actually have a conversation. And what do you think we found out is that people have data. They want to access that data to make evidence-based decision-making a real thing. And so they were all looking to do the same things. Everybody had data, and they either wanted to visualize it or mine it. A la, what do you think AI is? A simpler way to mine it. And we realized, wait a minute, all you guys came here, that would have been 15 security engagements that we don't have people to keep up with, and we can't hit the timeline. But really, you guys are all looking to do 5 of the same thing. So why don't we work with whoever has the most mature idea of what they want to do? Let's embed security by design thinking into that, and let's create a pattern. And let's reuse that pattern many times to help enable the other ones. And that's as simple as we started. It was, who has the hit record in the room? There's not more than 10 hit records. Why are they hit records? Because we all kind of like it. The jingle makes sense. And so it's the same thing. There could be 100 cloud services, but most folks are looking to use like 5 in almost the same identical way. So let's partner with those ones. Let's embed the security
by design thinking and privacy by design logic to it. Make the hit record once, reuse that pattern multiple times. Happy to say, because you asked, how are we being measured right now? We have several patterns. And it ranges from everything to, again, a lot of data. We want to visualize it. We want to mine against it. It's becoming the foundation for new patterns that are, all these new AI methodologies to mine the data. It's just another interface to access. So we're able to iterate that much faster because we have some of those mother sauces already established, and we're just, riffing on that. So that's been a really big one, and we are seeing our time to value. The other thing that's a byproduct that people don't realize is when you create these patterns, we're enabling the non-security teams to become security champions, right? Because when you see that, wait a minute, you guys are just doing the same thing, enable MFA or whatever the control is, our I&IT teams, our development teams, our executives are asking questions. And so that's some of the beauty of the patterns, is that if people know these are the standard things that help this product become secure by design, you can then evangelize it and take it forward at the board tables, the implementation tables. It just transcends beyond. We literally had our minister this week talking about protection for critical sectors and children. And this is a minister talking about why it's important, why data privacy is important, why we need to put controls in, why we need to empower and make sure that across Ontario, this is a minister, this is not a security expert. So just think about that. Right. That came out of patterns, that came out of conversations, and it transcends into real change that's going to impact us all. So, you can see where it can go. But it all starts with understanding what are the biggest problems you want to solve them once, reuse them many, and then build on that, because people will start to understand the importance of it. And when you get a whole room of different stakeholders evangelizing that, then you're really starting to make change. But it can start simple.
Yeah, it really makes me think about how oftentimes you have to get buy-in from higher ups, right, in order to start implementing these changes, because it's expensive time-wise to start doing this in the beginning, right? You're investing in new frameworks, new developments, and the more modular you can make it and implementable, the farther it's going to take you within a certain time frame. I had one more question, but I'm actually going to change it to two. And this is because I was talking with one of my colleagues last night, and this is a bit of a trick question. And we're both in cybersecurity, and we were thinking about, when do you know you've gone left enough, using the shift left notion, right? Is there ever a time when you say, okay, we've done enough of this securing by design across our organization and through our development practices? So I'm curious on both of your takes on, when do you know to stop, or do you ever stop this notion?
Thank you. I'll just speak about it. My experience with privacy always relates to what is the accessibility of personally identifiable data. Privacy is...
the microphone, because the online people can't hear you.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry. Okay, of course. My concern has always been with privacy, where do you draw the line and how do you address the issues? And it always starts and often ends with the accessibility of personally identifiable data. Privacy is all about control. Personal control over the use and disclosure of your personal information, your personal data. So if your data is out there, you've authorized it for use by some government department, totally fine. That's why you consented to its use. What happens then is, what about third parties? Often unauthorized third parties who gain access to your data. How do you deal with that? You don't. What privacy by design is all about preventing that from arising. That's why you have to be proactive. If you obtain the consent of the individuals for a particular primary purpose of the data collection, there's no issue. But once it gets into these secondary uses, which are often unauthorized, that's when the problems arise. So you have several choices. The easiest one is, once you've used the data for the primary purpose intended, scrub the personal identifiers from the data. name, address, and number, things like that. If there's no personal identifiers associated with the data, there's no privacy risk. And that's what, when I go into the boardrooms, I say, look, you can do whatever you want with the data. It's no longer personal information that needs to be protected. But once you still retain personal identifiers linked to the data, then you have to retain the protections throughout. And it becomes exceedingly more difficult to do so because third parties can easily often gain access to the data. And that's when privacy floats out the door. So I often remind people, organizations, it's all linked to the availability of personal identifiers remaining linked to the data. Once you've made use of the personal identifiers that you needed to deliver whatever service you're doing, get rid of them. Or if you can't get rid of them, encrypt them. Encryption is amazing. Encrypting data strongly at the front end so personal identifiers can't remain as personal identifiers except to those who have the encryption keys, it's amazing. So encryption is a very strong tool. But if you can't do that, you no longer need the data in personally identifiable form. Get rid of the identifiers and do what you want with the data. You have such flexibility and enormous ability to engage the data for the uses that you intended. So there are always ways. When people come to you and say, well, it's just not possible, tell them to go flying out the door, because it is indeed always possible. There's always an answer. I mean, trust me, I was Privacy Commissioner of Ontario for 3 terms, 17 years, and invariably somebody would come and say, well, we can't do it because of X. Well, you find the solution for X. That's what we have to do. It's no longer the case that we can't do it. It's just knowing how to do it and turning our minds to this. We can do this. If you have any troubles with that, call me.
Those are all great points. So, just circling back on, when do we know we've done enough? I think it will always iterate. It's an evolving landscape. Things are changing every day. But to me, where I think if security is part of the everyday lexicon, so MFA is not something for an expert, it's something that your grandmother raises because she's using online banking, and she said, I set up my MFA, or encryption, to Anne's point, because you can't have data out there that's not encrypted. If we are building it where our political figures, our everyday citizens are using those common tactics and techniques to secure stuff the same way that you wouldn't get in a car without a seatbelt, or you wouldn't go to a construction site without a hard hat, when we've gotten to that base, we're in good shape. And then to the point 9, we can start to iterate, because as fast as we do that, they'll come up with something new, but then we'll come up with something new. And as long as it's in our everyday lexicon of the way we think, then we're really at that first iteration, and we're set up to evolve from there and continue to grow as the landscape changes. One interesting data point, just because I know we like to deal with data, there was an interesting stat I saw from last year's threat reports that really said that ransomware attacks against large enterprises has actually gone down. And it's not because they don't want data that large enterprises have, is that because of those patterns, table stakes, MFA, encryption, data resilient or ransomware resilient backups has been adopted quicker in the enterprise because there's means. Mm-hmm. It's becoming a harder target, so the number's gone down. Where has the number gone up? Small to medium businesses, right? So if you just think of that juxtaposition on patterns, securing by design, making them essential, and where they are going to shift the trends and where we need to be, that one just jumped out to me really big. So I just wanted to share that, just to kind of tie in how it's all interrelated.
Amazing. And starting these development practices and frameworks, right, is much easier when your organization's small compared to when it's large, right?
Great
So
point.
starting this from the groundwork up and working through these frictions earlier on is really important. I know we're almost at time, and I do want to leave some Q&A, but one of the most important things about listening to a panel is having, tangible items to take away as security professionals and to begin implementing what we've talked about. So, Anne, I'd love to hear 1 or 2 takeaways that the audience can take with them today, and then Jason, I'd love to know what 1 or 2 takeaways from yourself are as well. So pass this along.
It's essential to always look under the hood, meaning don't just look at the output. How did it get there? And when you look under the hood, see if there's any personal identifiers linked to the data. That is the critical point relating to privacy, because I mentioned
Privacy is all about control, personal control relating to the use and disclosure of your personal information. If that information is with the company or the government department and the individuals aren't aware of its being used in personally identifiable form, your privacy goes out the door. So what I tell all organizations, before you make use of data, make sure either the personal identifiers have been stripped or proper consent has been obtained, but always look under the hood. Don't use the data until you've addressed those issues.
You kind of heard me say some of the takeaways, embedded in the thinking. Make sure that those 4 points that you want people to really do, because they're at the root cause of so many of the data breaches that we see, make sure they just become commonsensical information, not something that's guru-based or, set up MFA, pass those devices, encrypt, and just make sure that that becomes part of the lexicon. It was interesting. Maddie just walked a group of high school kids, and they were asking, what do you guys do? And someone asked, hey, those phishing campaigns? And the way it was said was that everybody should understand what a phishing campaign is or what phishing is. And they all knew what it was. But that's where we got to get to. If you say the word phishing, if you say the word patch, MFA, you shouldn't get a cross-eyed, what are you talking about? It should just be, oh yeah, I set that up. If we can get there, that's the tangible takeaway. If you can get that going in your org, you will be so much better. And don't get the excuse, as Dr. Ann said. You got to pass that. Shouldn't be why. I'll hurry up. I'll get on that this weekend. Not, man, I don't want to do that.
Now.
Exactly. If we get there, then we have some real wins that we can bring back and talk about.
I love both of those, and I think to summarize it before we go to Q&A, we have quite a lot of car analogies. So make sure you're looking under the hood. No one wants to lift up the hood and go into the dirty parts of the engine, right? But if you don't know what's lurking underneath there, and you're not going to be able to fix whatever oil leak you have going on. And keep your seatbelts on. I know, there's someone, when they put seatbelts in, there was a grumpy old man who was like, I don't need this, right? So you need to start building through that friction and ensuring that your organization and I keep talking about developers, but from development up understands that without a seatbelt, you're a liability not only to your organization, but outside of your organization as well. So with that, I would love to open it up to Q&A if there is any. And yeah, thank you all. Question at the back.
I'll just stand up, yeah. Hey, my name is Taz. I run a cybersecurity recruiting firm, and I've been having a lot of conversations with folks about GDPR, data, governance, privacy. And you talked about something really interesting. You said, you got to remove those data identifiers so that even if the data is leaked, it's not linked to people's personal information. I find it interesting because Google was in a lawsuit a couple of years ago with the data information that they have about users. So I think, do you think that will there be a regulation being passed on when companies collect this data, how are they going to detach themselves from the actual individual so that when these leaks happen, and they're more and more bound to happen, we're not facing the consequences?
When you say we're not facing the consequences,
The consumer or the user?
the consumer. This is beginning to happen, and in the States, not federally yet, but at the state level, there are amazing statutes coming out, like California has an amazing data privacy statute, and other states are doing it. Canada is a little slower, but they're working on something now. We'll see where it goes. This is underway. Everyone is abundantly aware of it. Unfortunately, in Canada, things seem to take a long time. We have PIPEDA, the federal private sector legislation. It's over 20 years old, like really. And this is the problem, is that updating legislation, it's a tedious task. It seems to take a long time. But we have to get moving on this. And the fact that they're moving on this in the States, in the US, should be indicating to us we have to move on this. In Europe, it's huge. Brazil just passed this law last year, which includes privacy by design. I've been speaking to them. I've been invited to Brazil at least a dozen times. I do it via Zoom.
Perhaps I'm stupid to do that, but it just takes too much time. But I'm constantly in contact with them because they want to do it, what they said, as they want to do it right. They want to address personal identifiers being removed right from the outset because that's the easiest way to comply in terms of privacy legislation, theirs and others from other places. So it's beginning. These things obviously take a lot of time, but I find convincing is probably too strong a word, but getting the message across, and it's almost easier to do it with businesses sometimes than governments, that it is to your advantage to do this, not just to the consumers, not just to your customers, not just to citizens, but to your organization's advantage to protect their privacy, because you're going to protect yourself from lawsuits and court actions. These are abounding now, and they will harm you significantly. So please, make it a win-win. Protect privacy and security proactively, and then you'll be ahead of the game.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Navid. I'm coming from TD Bank. One of the things that the bigger banks are considering, and they are not going to adopt generative AI soon, is that they're concerned about the privacy of the data and all of the information that are being used as learning for those machine learning AI. Because the banks are concerned that what if later on, as when a user is asking a question from that generative AI, they will release some of the protected data. What will that happen? So do we have any controls in place that we mandate all of these companies that are creating these generative AIs to protect our data when they are in the process of learning from our data?
I wish we did. I truly wish we did. And you're at the TD. It's so interesting. I just was invited to speak at CIBC last week, and they're very concerned with these issues because obviously to train machine learning AI, you need some data to work on and all that. But what data? And is that data, again, personally identifiable? And who has access to that data if the data haven't been protected, which usually they haven't? So these lead to enormous problems. So banks, understandably, as I see IBC invited me to speak to them, happy to speak to the TD because I actually do my banking at the TD, and I would really like you to do it properly.
It's a personal investment.
That's right, personal investment. It's critical. Unfortunately, the people who understand privacy and security at the companies are usually not the ones in charge. And that's my concern, is linking them. So that's why I love to talk to the ones in charge when I talk to boards of directors and CEOs, because I want them to then direct the staff who actually do this stuff to give them the ability to do it properly. So it's a work in progress. Stay tuned.
And just the last two things to add, just to pick up on that question. You heard Megan say it too, is at the end of the day, AI is just source code that is going to mine against your data and have access to it. So understanding the source code, understanding the vendors that you may contract to write source code that mines against your data is still the problem that we have to address. And until you understand what that looks like, don't grant them access to the data.
I know I could probably give quite a lot, not a hot take, but coming as Microsoft, and I'm not here to do a sales pitch, but when we're working through our the AI solution, so the 100 different co-pilots, I'm pretty sure there's going to be a co-pilot for my microwave at this point, but in working within the financial industry, myself, the way that we're providing these large language models is through having your own unit, right? So we're providing you the large language model. We do not touch your data. So that large language model that we've trained and put that time into is now yours. Your data stays with yourselves and it learns from you. No organization or another organization, so if you're at TD, let's say CIBC is not going to have the same training, although it's a bank, so they're going to operate probably very similarly as the one that your TD, say we're talking about security, so your security AI model is going to be training off of.
So what it needs to be on the premises, right? All of those servers and the learning mechanism, right?
Yeah. Awesome. We were given the 1 minute wrap up, so I'm gonna end it there. It's lunchtime, so in case anyone is hungry, we've had a wonderful morning of panels. So thank you all for attending. And
thank you guys.